Favorite entertaining 1990s movie. This is David Fincher's The Game, starring Michael Douglas. Here's why you should watch it. Here's my analysis of it. If you have watched it, coming up next. I gotta say, any movie that's titled The Game probably is good. I'm going to enjoy it. Anything with games in it sounds like fun, and that's what this movie is. It's Hitchcockian, Kubrickian delight galore. Some of you know David Fincher. He made the movie Seven a couple years before this, and he made Fight Club a couple years after this. This one sort of gets lost maybe in his filmography, but Criterion Collection did put out an excellent Blu-ray, which I strongly recommend you get because it looks crisp, nice, clean, and great on a big screen. Now, first, there's no spoilers, but just beware, this is a suspense movie in which I gotta discuss the whole movie, so spoilers will come later, and I'll tell you when. The movie stars Michael Douglas as an investment banker in San Francisco circa 1997, and hey, I was about 18 years old then, so this movie is a movie of my youth. He's invited by his younger brother, Sean Penn, to play a game, which is put on by Consumer Recreation Services. This is a gift given to him by his little brother for the man who has everything. What do you give an investment banker on his 48th birthday? And through photographs and other things, we come to learn that the Michael Douglas characters had a father who I think committed suicide on his 48th birthday or around his 48th year of life. So the Douglas character should be reflective of that, but we see he's kind of repressed. He avoids some things, his relationship with his ex-wife. He's cold. He lives in a vast mansion. It's almost Batman-like for this guy. And his younger brother, Sean Penn, might be trying to stir things up with this fun game. But what exactly is the game? Well, the Douglas character actually accidentally runs into the CRS storefront. He goes into it, has a bunch of psychological tests, has no clue what's going on, and it sounds at one point like, well, they're not going to honor his game. And then, well, a bunch of stuff happens to our character, and I can't spoil it yet, but this is a suspense movie in the vein of Alfred Hitchcock. 1990s thrillers, there's a bunch of them in the early 1990s. A man versus what seems to be a conspiracy or a secret society, or something going on, and that should drum up some paranoia for him. It's a suspense, maybe sort of a crime movie, and it has a lot of film echoes from film history. So if you haven't seen this movie, David Fincher, meticulous, very genius, I think, in a lot of ways. I like him a lot. He may not be the best director ever, but the filming of this is fantastic. You can watch it, be surprised, enjoy it, and it's very entertaining. But the second, third, and fourth times, it's got a lot more to it than what I thought. I miswatched it about 10, 15 years ago when I watched all of Fincher's filmography and thought, well, this movie, there's not a lot going on in it. It's not as complex as Fight Club. That's not true. I just watched it recently and found that you can watch it formalistically. Formally, filmography is great in it, but there's more to it, as I will now describe. So spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Do not watch beyond this point because I want you to see the movie first. If you have seen the movie, here we go. This movie is so fascinating to me because it's in the vein of a lot of paranoid conspiracy thrillers that not are just Hitchcockian, going in the 20s and 30s and 40s maybe, running all the way through, especially the late 1960s, 1970s, like the parallax view and the conversation, which is actually quoted here with the toilet that has blood and it overflows over the Michael Douglas character, the classic Coppola movie, The Conversation. All those movies come up here. And in the early 1990s, tons and tons of Philip K. Dickian movies in which there's a greater conspiracy. The character doesn't know who's out to get him, what world he's in. This movie is fascinating because it's a happy conspiracy thriller. What happens at the end of the movie is delightful. That is very different from almost every conspiracy thriller ever, the paranoid conspiracy thrillers of this period. And I love the point it is making, a very general point, that not all paranoid conspiracies are bad. Just to say that, some of them are actually good, like surprise parties, like great pranks or great practical jokes in which everyone, including the one who's pranked, can laugh at the outcome. And so this movie, what happens in the end is it is a game and it is a party in the end that is, weirdly, I think this is one of the flaws, a therapy exercise for our main character who has to overcome somehow the guilt, the burden of his father's death and all of his repression and his need to forgive or ask for forgiveness from his ex-wife, his need to bond with his brother who's more absurd and fun-loving, and all these things need to happen to their uptight investment banker character at the end. I think he's also got to learn, actually, some paranoia, and he's got to learn not to trust people all the way through. For example, the battery of psychological tests that he takes at CRS, I'm not sure any of those are necessary. Maybe a few of those are for CRS to conduct its game, but I think a lot of that is to show that this character is complicit in conforming, in agreeing to do things, and he's just willing to, not say no to things, and as he should, or not challenge things as he should. So he eventually does that in the end, and there's some sort of psychological redemption and some personality changes perhaps for this character, or at least possibly so. At the end of the movie, boy, everyone, it turns out, has been acting on behalf of the game, I think. That's one way to interpret this. And the reality of the Douglas character is it's all hyper real. So this is a postmodern exercise in which he doesn't know whether he's in a simulation, a game, or not. Are all things real or all things not? He can't tell. That's hyper reality. And then, of course, as part of late 1990s movies like The Matrix, for example, even Fight Club and Dark City, and so on. So the fact that he doesn't know what's real and what's not, but in the end it's revealed to him that all was a performance, that is one of the hallmarks of some postmodernist thought, that everything is a performative act, that we are all actors and using conventions and trying to perform our way through life. Well, that's what the main character figures out. And I think in the end, absurdism wins out over uptight investment banking. But certainly I think one thing that comes up here is a celebration perhaps of capitalism and excess. I have to thank one of my Letterboxd friends, Evan Adams, who says this movie is a combination, I hadn't thought of this, a combination of Kafka's The Trial, which doesn't end well, or a bunch of Kafka stories, with A Christmas Carol, which kind of does end well, but it's kind of anti-capitalist in that, not quite, but that's, in my opinion, but Scrooge needs to learn to participate in the feast day of the people of his day. Well, in this movie, the younger brother pays for all of these services. It's an enormous bill, and it's shown off, not the number of the price of the game, but it's discussed at the end of this movie, and like, whoa, look at all this excess, and let's party. It sort of valorizes excess and consumerism, as this character, the Douglas character, learns that he is a small man in a giant, vast consumeristic system, and maybe that's okay. So the hyperreality he learns and deals with is enjoyable by the end, and the consumer game that he plays is a fun and therapeutic experience. Now, what's that like? This movie is about movies themselves. In fact, movies, period, where everyone's acting out a scene or a plot, and it may be suspenseful, dramatic, but in the end, it's a celebration. And what's happening in the end of this movie? They're footing the bill for a movie. Basically, this is a real-life movie in which the main character participates in, but doesn't realize it's a movie. Therefore, this movie may be affirming another postmodernist idea, which is that art and entertainment is just cordoned off from reality, and it's different from reality itself. Maybe in postmodernist thought there's no reality, by the way, but that art is its own entity, and it celebrates itself. This movie is celebrating art itself and suspense movies themselves by the end with the party scene. I say all that, and that all may seem heady, but I think ultimately this movie's tone, it has a really subtle tone of hilarity. Funny enough, because suspense movies usually aren't hilarious unless they're black comedies or they're mocking suspense movies. But this movie, all the way through, if you're watching it as a straightforward thriller, you wouldn't notice it's hilarious. But the movie begins with a ridiculous juvenile joke. The younger brother, Sean Penn character, uses the alias Seymour Butts, which is a long-time stupid high school, middle school joke. And throughout the rest of the movie, once you see the end of the movie, the main character, Michael Douglas character, has been punked. He's been practical joked the whole way through. And there's a sequence of like little digs at him, and often humorous, subtly humorous moments, such as when, several times, in fact 3 times, his house is effectively raided and punked. In a sense, it's mocked, it's made fun of, but only for the sense of delight, and it's reaffirmed and restored later in a comedic sense. So we're all having fun with rich people, and here a rich person has to learn to give up his wealth and be absurd in order to rejoin the elite clubs that he's in and the elite society that he's in. And the whole point, watched through the younger brother's eyes, this is just a ridiculous, absurdist game. And maybe that's what makes us postmodernists. Ultimately, everything is for the sake of playfulness, an absurd playfulness, an absurd referential meta playfulness. And I think that's one way you can look at this whole movie, that by the end, there's an undercurrent of hilarity. And I think it's funny, by the way, that the main character at the end, he has the hots for, and he hits on the blonde woman who has been 3 or 4 different characters in this movie. By the end, he doesn't know her at all. She's just an actress. She gives him a real name, but who is she really? He throughout the entire thing, this movie is kind of like if Jimmy Stewart at the end of Vertigo, found Kim Novak and she was actually alive. And then they had a party, right? And so at the end of the movie, then Jimmy Stewart's hitting on Kim Novak, who's just jumped off a building and died. That's what it feels like, that Vertigo has been turned into a comedy. And I find that actually kind of funny at the end of this movie. And the goofy, ridiculous Michael Douglas character, he's been made fun of the whole time. And I love that Michael Douglas is cast in this movie. There's a bunch of associations, filmic associations with himself as an actor, and a couple of those are with paranoid conspiracy thrillers. Look up his filmography from the 1970s and 80s, like Fatal Attraction, but also, his Gordon Gekko character, probably the most famous capitalist in movie history, who says greed is good, very famously, in the movie Wall Street. Well, here he's playing a version of that, in my opinion, and that kind of Gordon Gekko-like character is being punked, and his cold, calculating greed is being undercut by absurdism. Nevertheless, the desire for riches and the need to be rich is, I think, perhaps being valorized by the end of the movie. Anyway, those are some of the ways you could look at the end of this movie. I'm sure there's actually more than that, and frankly, you can just enjoy this movie for the ride that it is, and the filming, the cinematography of it, which is just really well done and exquisite. Frankly, I wish there were more Hitchcockian-like thrillers like this. There's not enough of these. We need a couple good ones a year. Why can't we have them? Anyway, what do you think of David Fincher's The Game? Let us know in the comments, and please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you, and have a great day.